Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, happy Thursday, and thank you for listening, whether it's on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, wherever you podcast. Been efforting to get this podcast up and running on YouTube Music. Now that I know that a lot of people listen to podcasts on YouTube Music, I had somebody literally ask me, "Hey, could you put your show on YouTube?" Okay, sure, yeah. It takes a little bit of time to upload hundreds of episodes, but we are working on that. In fact, I think we're up to January of this year. By the time I went to bed last night. Anyway, thank you for listening. I appreciate that. Melita Easters joins us from the Georgia Win List, who is now an internationally known Georgia political pundit because I see her all the time on BBC News. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me on.
I do appreciate that. They have a saying I remember watching The West Wing. They have a saying in political circles and in journalistic circles that a lot of times people like to throw out the trash on Friday, the stories that they don't want to get any traction because they know that the American public is somewhat distracted going into the weekend. I can't help but wonder if a Friday in November might have been trash day. The Friday before Thanksgiving, a short work week, going into the weekend. We're already distracted just by the weekend, also very distracted by the thing called Thanksgiving and in the post-election malaise. And then ProPublica reports that Georgia's maternal mortality board completely got wiped out. And
yes,
that in any other news cycle would be huge news, jaw-dropping news, and yet it really didn't get a whole lot of attention, even by myself. I mean, I took the next week off. We started this week with some important, interviews lined up. We had Senator Harold Jones on. We had Jen Senko on. And so here we are today, finally getting around to talking about this. But this is an important story, and you are the one that I wanted to have on to discuss this. So good morning. Let's get at it.
Thank you so much. The news event, which was not reported, as you said, until just before Thanksgiving, and I happened to watch that throw out the trash episode of West Wing with my daughters over Thanksgiving, so cool. I remember it vividly. Kathleen Toomey, Dr. Kathleen Toomey, who is the commissioner of the State Department of Public Health, sent a letter November the 8th to all the members of that committee, the Maternal Mortality Review Committee, saying that they were all dismissed because confidential information provided to the committee was inappropriately shared with outside individuals. By that, she meant the September 16 ProPublica story, which reported on the deaths of 2 Georgia women who died when they could not access legal abortions and timely medical care back in 2022. Now, the members of that committee do, in fact, sign a confidentiality agreement. But the thing that's curious about all of this is that under Georgia law, the members of the committee see only summaries of medical records which are stripped of personal details. Their findings on individual cases are not supposed to be shared with the public, not even with the hospitals or family members of the women who died. But if they don't have the personal information and they were, quote, the ones who leaked, how did ProPublica figure out who these 2 women were for their articles? So it's not even clear that the 32 members of that committee were the ones who leaked the information to ProPublica. But they disbanded the committee. And it's interesting that you and I are talking today, December 5th, because tomorrow, Friday, December 6th, is the deadline the Department of Public Health has set for applications for the new Maternal Mortality Review Committee. Applicants are supposed to fill out an online SurveyMonkey document, which Winlist has promoted the address of.
Oh, cool.
And in the hopes that very vibrant group of medical professionals. The previous committee had, I believe, 10 doctors among the 32 members.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact that several midwives and physicians have already applied for that committee. And there are some other members of the community who are very interested in the issue who have applied for that committee. The details on how the committee will be selected and who makes the final selection are pretty scarce. The Department of Public Health has been very close-mouthed about any of this since that ProPublica story broke.
Interesting, by the way, that November 8th was also a Friday. I wanted to point that out, too. This is, first of all, you said there were 32 people on this committee, right? They seem intent on believing that someone on that committee or people on that committee have been back-channeling with ProPublica, with or without proof, and decided if we can't just get one or get a few, we're going to get them. Why the entire committee? That's my thing. It's like
and they haven't said. And the thing, it's important for your listeners to know that these maternal mortality review committees exist in every state. And these committees are tasked with examining the deaths of women during a pregnancy or up to a year after a pregnancy to determine whether those deaths could have been prevented. But there's a 2-year lag time in how they process these reports. So the Georgia committee's most recent report found that of 113 pregnancy-related deaths from 2018 through 2020, 101 of those had at least some chance of being prevented. But what you're seeing in all of these states where there are abortion regulations is that these maternal deaths are increasing, and often the increase is attributed to the lack of clarity about what constitutes the life of a mother and would allow an exception to abortion bans for the life of the mother. And there was an interesting article in USA Today on October the 30th about a woman who suffered a second trimester miscarriage, but almost died in the hospital waiting for the go-ahead on the necessary procedure because she wasn't near death enough for them to justify the medical procedure she needed, which was, in effect, an abortion. So these cases happen. The laws are vague, and it would literally require going back and redefining what the exceptions mean, which most legislatures are not willing to do because that opens up the whole can of worms of whether abortion bans are truly wanted by the public, and public opinion polls tell us they are not in a post-Roe world.
Which brings me to a question. Why is what this committee does so secretive? Why is it not? Why can they not? I understand like HIPAA laws, but why can they not release findings? Or does it just quietly go to someone on the legislature, or are they allowed to present themselves and their findings at a legislative hearing? I mean, we all know those are broadcast usually on YouTube or something like that. Why is what they do so secretive? Why is it under lock and key?
I think it probably has a lot to do with HIPAA, and it probably also has a lot to do with not wanting to give ammo for medical malpractice lawsuits. So if you have a state committee saying that this death was preventable, then the lawyers representing that family can use the state committee deliberations in a lawsuit. So I'm sure that those factors have a great deal to do with what is allowed to be discussed publicly. But the other thing is, you have to understand the findings of a committee like this to improve the policies and procedures which can prevent future deaths. And it's obvious in these accounts, the ProPublica account of the 2 deaths in 2022, right after the abortion ban was reinstated as a result of the Roe v. Wade overturn. We have no clue about deaths in 2023 and 2024 yet. The only clue we have about the misunderstandings which continue to exist around the law is that October 30th story about the woman who was brave and courageous enough to talk about her October 2024 experience.
Right.
And this is a woman, Avery Davis Bell is a woman who has a PhD in genetics from Harvard Medical School. So you know that she and her husband were probably the most effective advocates for good care on her behalf you could possibly have, aside from the doctor herself advocating for her own care.
And again, because there's so much going on in the world and so much going on domestically, politically, even that story didn't get the traction that it deserved.
True.
And I mean, you know, shame on me, shame on a lot of us for not, pouncing on this story. There's just been so much else going on, unfortunately.
Well, there is a lot of stuff going on, and the thing is, deflecting attention is one of the ways that Republicans, creating confusion and chaos is a way of diverting attention from issues like this one. When people are talking about the sex lives of cabinet nominees.
Yeah. Well, or
then they're not talking about women potentially dying because they're pregnant, because
there is that.
Sex sells in the headlines.
Yeah. It's ironic that you sort of bring that up, because I was actually going to ask you, from your point of view as an advocate for women in government and their roles in government, your thoughts on some of Trump's cabinet positions. But I tell you what, let me take a quick swig of coffee and a break here, and we'll come back and I'll let you tee off on that. We're with Melita Easters from the Georgia Windlist, Executive Director of the Georgia Windlist, on The Ron Show, America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast, which now, by the way, includes YouTube Music. Thought I'd point that out again. You can follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platform, which, those on the left, we love Blue Sky now. I'm there, at Ron Show ATL. Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, we're on it. As is the Georgia Windlist on much of those social media platforms. Have you guys wandered onto Blue Sky as well? Melita Easters joins us from the Georgia Windlist.
We are figuring out Blue Sky over the next few days, but all of our social media is at GAWINLIST.
Thank you so much. So my first thought when we learned that the Georgia Maternal Mortality Review Committee, that is such a long thing, was completely wiped out in November, was, wow, this is very like Soviet, Nazi Germany-ish sort of, right? The send a message, let them all know, and sort of a warning. And I'm sure they'll have a conversation when they swear in the new 32-person board committee that they're recruiting for right now. But didn't it feel a lot like something censorish?
Well, it did feel a lot like, if you don't like the message, kill the messenger.
Yeah.
To abolish an entire 32-person committee because they couldn't determine who leaked the information to the press, to ProPublica. And I think there are questions about, was it the committee or was it someone on the staff?
Right. Yeah. I mean, why not launch an investigation?
Well, I think they did. Yeah. And I think they were very frustrated with not being able to pinpoint who leaked. And so the first way to solve the problem was to abolish the committee.
Yeah, I mean it's a volunteer committee anyway. It's not like they make a whole
It
lot of
is.
money or
They
anything
have a
like
small
that.
stipend. I mean, in fact, the committee meets, let's see, the committee meets 1.5 hours, 5 to 7 times a year.
Yeah. So, yeah, but my thing is, like, it's a pretty large committee. That's 32 people, and is it hard to find
And
32
they're
people
medical,
interested
many of them are medical
who are
professionals.
busy and have other lives? Yeah.
Right.
Is it hard to find 32 people who are interested in being on a committee like this, do you think?
I guess we're about to find out because like I said earlier in our conversation, the applications close on December the 6th, tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And they're asking for people like who have specialties in obstetrics, cardiology, maternal fetal medicine, OB anesthesiology, nurses, midwives, family physicians, social workers, mental health therapists, addiction, substance abuse specialists, community-based organization type people, people who work with domestic violence or behavioral health peer support, home visiting nurses. So all of those areas are areas the application said they are looking for.
Okay, I want to pivot real quick. And by the way, you have the information on how to apply for that on all your social media platforms as well, right?
Yes, we do. We shared it, yes.
Terrific.
On Facebook in particular, and also on a blog post in the Windlass website.
All right, good deal. So the Trump cabinet picks and a lot of the other, he tapped Kelly Loeffler for heading the Small Business Association. Donald Trump hasn't been shy about appointing women to key roles. So there's that. But he
gets points for that, yes.
Yeah, such as they are. He also has stood firmly entrenched behind for a while Matt Gaetz, who had his own issues of sexual, misdeeds, alleged, and Pete Hegseth as well, who now has his mother running around cable news and talking to anybody who will let her about how wonderful her son is, and yet it was not all that long ago. Well, and it's
interesting that this same mother wrote him a scathing letter in the midst of his divorce, and she's now saying, "Oh, but I took that letter back and apologized." If you are appointing cabinet level men who have troubling histories in their treatment of women, you might be a misogynist. And they might be misogynist as well. And we should be past the point that misogyny is an acceptable behavior for high-level government officials because it shows a great disrespect for half the population.
Well, and he has views on women serving in the military, and there's already talk about the trans-military ban again. So, I mean, I don't mean to confuse the two, but women serving in combat, first of all, kudos to anyone who wants to serve in combat. I don't give a rat's ass who you are or what's in your pants. And it's usually more arduous for a woman to meet the criteria to do that. Why single out an entire gender?
Well, I can speak to that. My daughter is a proud U.S. Naval Academy graduate with honors in 2005. She served her country in the U.S. Marine Corps as an officer. She served 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan in combat. She ran air support control in Afghanistan. It's where she met her future husband, who was a military pilot. So women have key roles in combat. They serve admirably. And to question whether they should continue to serve is ridiculous and absurd.
End of story. Yeah. But again, We heard so much during the campaign cycle about who's dividing whom, and this always seems to be an opportunity, particularly with a second Trump administration, to tee up the opportunity for them to look at the fissures, the fractures that exist in our society, and instead of running for the duct tape, running for the wedge. Trying to put something in.
Divide people, divert attention, sow discord, and then attempt to quash dissent. Those are parts of the Republican playbook.
Yeah.
And that is the pathway to authoritarian government.
Mm. I've been talking a lot about the existence of the right-wing media ecosystem and how the left doesn't really seem to have that. You are a journalist. You come from a journalism background, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about that and some news that I actually learned about last night about the existence of folks planting the seeds to create something like that on the left, and I want to get your thoughts on it. But I've got to take a quick break. We're with Melita Easters, Executive Director of the Georgia Win List on The Ron Show, America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast.
Call or text The Ron Show anytime at 404-919-2725. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
All right, so Melita Easters, Georgia Win List Executive Director, joining us, and I appreciate you giving me some time, and I know I'm running a little over, but I wanted to ask you, because you cut your teeth as a journalist in this state. You've talked at length a few times on this show in particular about being on the ground in Plains, Georgia, the night that Jimmy Carter won the presidential election back in 1976. We have had a lot of conversation since the election about some of the things that the left can do better at. And I think that's a healthy discussion. I think a lot of us have realized, and it's not a big secret, I think a lot of us have realized that we hear a lot of talk about how the mainstream media has a liberal bias, and I always push back, well, journalists are supposed to report the facts, data, math, science, logic, and if those have a liberal bias, then the problem isn't with journalism, it's with the fact that they are reporting and conservatives are screaming. But that being said, there is no such existence of a left-wing version of that right-wing media ecosystem. And I've been saying several times now on this show since then that we should work to develop something like that. And it would be easier than what the right has spent decades building, from the advent of religious talk radio to conservative talk radio to Fox News to getting on the podcast spectrum in greater numbers, because we have the ease of just reporting or just discussing facts, logic, math, data, science. So listen, I get up every morning. I start this show around 8 in the morning, so it's produced and on the air by 9 a.m. If I had to come up and concoct narratives and create stories out of nothing, yes, this would be a tough task for me to do. And then I get on with my day and I go do real estate and other stuff like that. But so, I mean, I'm not sitting here suggesting that this is just an easy thing to do, but it is easier just to have the facts at our back. I wanted to get your thoughts on what our media ecosystem looks like and how over time we've come to have this hardly even discussed. I mean, Hillary Clinton brought it up in the 1990s, the vast right-wing, conspiracy, network, but it's so in plain sight, and I don't think society really pays enough attention to the existence of it. And now I'm happy to hear that the left is starting to have conversations on how we develop our own version of that.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct that the Republicans and the conservative movement are decades ahead of the Democrats and the left in news channel development, so to speak. Mm. And, for Republicans, it started when Ronald Reagan dismissed the Fairness Doctrine and expedited a passport for Rupert Murdoch, who had basically been deemed persona non grata in the British Empire. Mm. And so that set the ground then for some of Reagan's chief communications strategists to work with Murdoch in building his media empire in the United States. And there hasn't been the same efforts on the left. You do now see in some places, for example, here in Georgia, there's a nonprofit consortium that's supporting weekly newspapers so that they don't completely die out in small rural communities. DuBose Porter's very involved in that. But you need to have a better support for and stability and infrastructure for journalism that is not biased towards the right. And then I think the other problem, and this falls squarely with partisan politics, is that Democrats lag behind Republicans in communications strategy.
Yes.
In having an overall message, in learning to communicate their message more effectively. Republican candidates receive far better training than Democratic candidates on messaging. And Republican candidates have at their fingertips a unified Republican message that they have access to and can use on the campaign trail or even during a legislative session. Democrats are not as well versed in doing that, and they need to be. And it's a failing of everyone on the Democratic side. And I think it arises in part because Democrats try to have such a big tent. But there need to be some core principles and core values that Democratic candidates adhere to and speak about with ease. You know, Democrats tend to be, to my mind, policy wonks, so to speak. You give a Democrat the opening to say something, and they'll go on for 3 paragraphs. You give the Republican an opening to say something, and they deliver a quick 10 to 20 second soundbite.
A bumper sticker slogan, right? Which is easier for the American public to digest. I fully recognize that.
Well, and Republicans have trained themselves to speak in sound bites.
Yes.
At about a 3rd to 5th grade level. Democrats have the facts behind them, and they're going to tell you about every damn one of them.
And how they arrived at them, too. Right.
Yes.
No, you're absolutely right. My guest yesterday was Jen Senko, the author and documentarian behind The Brainwashing of My Dad. And in that documentary, she points out the fact that, Grover Norquist had created the Wednesday meeting, the weekly meeting that, a lot of partisan pundits were having and getting together and working on their messaging each Wednesday. And between Grover Norquist and Frank Luntz, who, is something of a wordsmith, learning how to boil down phraseology to make it easier for folks to understand and to grasp. And again, having the network of talk radio pundits and columnists and talking heads to go on Fox News. And even, let's be honest, even the supposed liberal media, CNN, MSN, they find themselves with some of these folks on, because they give equal time, as often as they can on Meet the Press, Sunday mornings. You find that even the so-called liberal media provides oxygen to that fire.
This is very true. And we as Democrats, as progressive policy adherents, need to fine-tune how we message about our issues, how we talk about them. And that's a big, big thing that Democrats need to spend some time, energy, and effort on between now and 2026, and especially between now and 2028. Because Republicans are ahead of us.
I had an entire segment, I think it was the week before Thanksgiving, where I sort of openly opined, because it seems that the state Party is going to have a new chair at some point in time, that whoever that new chair is needs to, and they're happy to call me, by the way, 404-919-2725, to have a conversation about tearing apart and rebuilding its own communication mechanism, because it is a rat's nest of wires that go many different places. Any of us who've ever uninstalled or reinstalled a computer or a sound system, say a sound bar to your TV, and you pull the entertainment center back and you just look like a rat's nest of wiring, somebody needs to come in and clean all that out, get rid of the excess stuff, and rewire it so that it makes sense. I say all that because the Georgia Democratic House and the Georgia Democratic Senate, they all have like their own various little social media or YouTube channels, this, that, and the other. It just needs to be more cohesive. One route for folks to get to. They need to do a better job at it. I come from a radio background, and we used to work for little mom and pop radio stations, right? And we were all on our own. And then when we got swallowed up by bigger companies, nothing that I'm proud of, nothing that I fully support, obviously, because I believe local wins, and obviously corporate radio is one of the reasons why we wound up with Rush Limbaugh. But one of the cool things that you did get out of being bought up by a bigger company is websites that were ready to plug and play, go to work right away, and even something as simple as logo design feeds into your social media with information. These are the sort of things that like Democrats they're just not good at. And I don't know if they just need to have an expert come in and do that, but having even like a weekly or at need social media apparatus that is, a myth buster sort of thing, something how to just quickly work on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook with videos that say, okay, here's what they're saying and here are the facts. These are the sort of things that I think that the Democratic Party at the state level for sure lacks, and we see that at the federal level as well. They just were not able to act, especially with the presidential campaign, to a lot of untruths.
Well, you make great points, as one might expect.
Oh, thank you so much. Melita Easter's Executive Director, Georgia Windless. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Ron Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Actually, talking about the lack of a right-wing media ecosystem or the idea of cohesiveness or being on message, that's something, obviously, if you've listened to this show since election night, you know that that's something that I've been talking about quite a bit. And I routinely say, as you heard me say a few times in that conversation, the left has facts and logic and data, math, science, all at its disposal to use. We should have an easier time being on message. And yet, as you heard Melita say, Democrats, liberals, progressives, we're a fractious bunch. We all have our divergent ideas, even though we try to fall under one big tent, and sometimes we're going to stray from those, and that's fine. But on core policy positions and unified messaging, the left has been not good at that. As you've heard me discuss over the last couple of days, the advent of the right-wing ecosystem, we know the history, how it came to be now, thanks to NPR's On the Media piece from Sunday. Fantastic job on specifically talk radio. And then since the release of The Brainwashing of My Dad in 2016, we can't say we aren't aware of the evolution of that right-wing media ecosystem. So when does the left develop its own version? Well, I was talking with America One radio president Jeremy Persil last night, actually, and he said, have you heard about chorus? And I'm like, no, what is chorus? I mean, I didn't want to sing in one when I was in high school. And it's not because I can't sing. I can sing very well, actually. At least karaoke. Somewhat. Pretty good. I'd give myself a B-. I was in the band, but I was also a closeted gay kid, so I couldn't join the chorus. Because if you join the chorus, you do drama, and you're a man, you get the label, right? There was already enough smoke for folks to realize there was a fire, and I was in the closet. And shame on me for that, because I would have enjoyed it. Anyway, got totally off track there. Chorus is a collective that is being headed by the likes of Lee McGowan, a.k.a. Politics Girl on TikTok. She's a fantastic follow if you don't follow her. Follow her on one of your social media platforms. I've been avoiding TikTok. I have an account, but I don't go on it very much because they've been talking about banning it. Why get used to it, right? And now I actually think they're working on selling it to an American firm of some sort. So maybe I'll get more on TikTok. And should, probably, because that is where the younger generation tends to get its news from. It appears, however, the leader of this movement is one Brian Tyler Cohen. And if you are a liberal or a leftist, you have social media, you have probably seen his videos a number of times. He is really good at what he does. He's also super handsome. But there's one thing about him that I find kind of interesting. You don't see him all that often on MSNBC, on CNN, on ABC News, Sunday morning with George Stephanopoulos or Meet the Press. But he is a leading progressive voice on social media.
I've been beating the drum about growing the progressive media ecosystem for years now. We've finally got an exciting update. I'm part of a team of creators that's created Chorus Media. Chorus is a creator-led group of voices from the left coming together to scale up, drive the conversation online, and try and rebalance the massive disparity at play on the left and the right. So here's the deal. Chorus is going to support left-wing creators in a bunch of tangible ways, funding editors and researchers and bookers, helping creators who are established on one platform make sure they've got a presence on the others, and coordinating our messaging. Now, for me specifically, I'm not going to accept any funding. That money needs to go to new creators and the folks who can help them grow, but I'll be focused on message coordination. It has felt for the last decade like Republicans head into a morning meeting to get aligned on messaging. That disparity goes away now. If you'd like to support our efforts financially, that would be appreciated. You can click the link in the link tree in my bio. But otherwise, we can all play a role by supporting progressive creators on all platforms and helping us build out our infrastructure.
Wearechorus.com if you want to watch that video or learn more about what Chorus is going to be. I've already reached out to them. I'm happy to add my name, my show, to their collective. And certainly if they want to help fund an editor, I could use an editor or someone. Actually, just the idea. I'm not looking for money. By the way, you can support the show at ronshowatl.com. What I'm looking for is more the booking part. Like when I heard that they will cross-pollinate to book folks from other platforms. Yes, absolutely. Do you know how many times I've tried to reach out to Lee McGowan or even to Brian Tyler Cohen? Like, I'd love to have these folks on my show. And even if I don't have these folks, the fact that we're starting to develop a collective to work together to cross-promote our interests and to have conversations that drive policy eventually at some point in time. Very exciting stuff, and count me among those who will start warming up the vocals here so that I can join that chorus. You're listening to The Ron Show. Thank you for that. On America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Final few minutes of The Ron Show, and I haven't yet discussed the brazen slaying 6 a.m. hour assassination-style killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson yesterday. I do find this to be an interesting, intriguing story, one that whether we do or don't get answers as to who the gunman was, what his motives were, it's sparked a conversation about health insurance and how viscerally upset the American public is with the system we call healthcare in these United States. We spend more than anybody else hoping for better healthcare outcomes, and we don't get the good outcomes at all. In fact, we trail most of the first world when it comes to life expectancy and relative health. And we're heading into a presidential administration with an FDA nominee, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I'm not sure is a serious man for that role. He obviously has had his open questioning of vaccinations and has some curious thoughts on food and drug safety, some of which, by the way, I actually sort of agree with. It's funny how the horseshoe has those two sides on opposite ends coming close to each other in some respects, right? He's right that we have a lot of crap in our food that the FDA has been rubber stamping. And listen, the Obama administration put a lot of Monsanto folks in positions of authority while president, so it's not like the left doesn't have, I don't want to say blood, but grease on its hands as well. So it'll be interesting to see if he follows through on a lot of his ideology, especially with a president who likes to eat Big Macs and fries from McDonald's all the time. But I digress. I yesterday sat back and watched for 4 hours as corporate media really hammered on this story. And it's a sensational story. Manhattan gunned down broad daylight, a CEO in for corporate meetings, and folks want to know what's up. So corporate media really wanted us to be aghast that this well-paid CEO of a health insurance company that routinely denies care and certainly makes its customers go through ardent, vigorous levels of duplicitous acts, often enduring looped on-hold music during periods of extremely high call volumes, was gunned down and killed yesterday. Now, I don't know that the assassin has a bone to pick with the man or the company he ran, but would that stun anyone if that were the case? I mean, can the district attorney's office even seat a jury of 12 who'd go in with an open mind? I'm kind of kidding, but not. I'm not saying that folks are right to go around gunning down billionaires and CEOs. I am saying you can only nudge the stove knob so high before the frog realizes the water's starting to boil, right? The frog in our case is armed to our teeth. What I expect will be some introspection, no, not on how health insurance industry execs rob us or the 1% continue to take from us while the 99%ers work harder and make less. No, I suspect the wealth class will have someone among them who will step up and create a Secret Service style security firm to further insulate each other from the kind of blowback the CEO allegedly potentially got yesterday. As I said before, we spend enough on healthcare and are taxed enough at the state and federal level that healthcare should be universally provided. But then how will health insurance CEOs make their money? How will the industry continue to pay the 600 to 900,000 Americans it employs? Am I supposed to be worried about that? They sell us on a product they work hard to deny us, even when we've diligently paid for it. Maybe they should be put in the situation of finding a more fulfilling career to work in. The business model no longer serves our society in any useful purpose. And I don't really even mean to be smug about folks being out of work. Being between jobs is no fun. Trust me, as a former radio guy, I've been in that situation a number of times. There are a lot of industries needing help handling those unexpectedly high call volumes too. I'm kidding. Humans, though, seem to adapt to need and lack of need anyway. Blacksmiths, telegraphists, telephone operators come to mind. What did they do? I'm hoping they adapted and found another calling. I digress. A man lost his life, a family is grieving, wife, 2 kids left behind, and a killer is still on the loose. And I hate a grieving wife and those 2 kids have lost their family's patriarch. But I also hate even more that families and loved ones grieve unnecessarily when they have loss of life due to corporate bureaucracies rubber stamping denials of claims too. So what are we going to do about it? Well, I certainly don't suggest we run to the gun store and ammo up to take on billionaires and CEOs. That's not how we solve problems in this country, in our society. It doesn't solve much. Violence is not the answer. Sound policy and a means to getting to enacting that sound policy, that's the answer. It is unfortunate that we will not see anything close to movement towards universal health care in this country. In fact, we'll probably take a step or 2 back in the next 2 to 4 years. But it should spur us to action when we're given the opportunity every 2 years to vote for your congressman or woman, and every 4 years when you get the opportunity to vote for who leads the country. And don't leave the state offices out here either, because they make decisions on healthcare coverage at the state level. No, the human in me is horrified that someone lost their life at the hands of a killer, driven by whatever animus that killer was driven by. I mean, there's rumors of insider trading and contract-style kill. I don't know. I focus on the man's role in the world, corporately speaking, and completely understand why there is a sense of indifference, even in some respects indignance, at this tragedy. It ain't right. It's not something I would abide by moralistically, but I do understand it. I want to thank Melita Easters from the Georgia Win List for joining us. We'll include the link, by the way, if you are interested and are qualified for the Georgia Maternal Mortality Review Committee. We'll put that in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Back tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m., on America One Radio, 11 p.m. to midnight at Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Take care.